Shana Tova. I'm Rabbi Jan Uhrbach, a member of the editorial committee for Machzor Lev Shalem, the prayer book you'll be using for the High Holy Days. And I'm delighted to give you a little insider's look into the book and what it can offer now. Obviously, when we edited this Machzor, we never imagined that it would be used in the circumstances we find ourselves in this year. But it's really a prayer book that was kind of made for this moment. We hoped and expected that people would want to spend time with it at home. And we hoped and expected that people would use the book to pray in a combination of staying with the service that's being led and making their own private choices. It's a book intended to empower individuals to engage in a creative hybrid of communal and private prayer. So I'm going to start by giving you a little tour of the layout of the book so you can use it comfortably on your own. Right in the front, there's a table of contents, no surprise, but each listing is kind of it's a top-level table of contents, top-level menu. It's kind of a hyperlink, and each page that it sends you to will have a more detailed menu of that section of the service, a more detailed table of contents. There are also glossaries in the back of Hebrew terms, of the historical figures and the works that are cited throughout the book. So let's take a look at a page. I'm going to share my screen so we can all see this. And you'll notice right at the top here that there's a large heading in red. Major sections of prayer will always have a heading like that. Here it's Shema and its blessings. It might be preparatory prayers or the Haftarah, the Torah service. You'll see in red at the top. There are also subheadings in black italics on the English side, which are names of particular prayers or particular blessings. Here, Baruch Hu and the first bracha, the first blessing before the Shema, the creation of light. The traditional liturgy is always in the center of the page, the Hebrew and the English. And there is transliteration. We try to transliterate things that in many communities are sung aloud by the congregation as a whole. Obviously, individual practices differ, but the transliteration is always in red italics underneath the translation of the text that's being transliterated. You should also notice here this little red symbol. It's here on the English side too. That's a symbol that indicates when to bow. On page Roman numeral 11 in the introduction, there's a chart of all the symbols in the book. It's a good idea to just take a look at them so you know what they mean. The commentary on both sides of the page are of very different types. So depending on what most interests you, you'll go to one side or the other. On the right side, on this column, you will find primarily explanatory historical type of commentary, issues regarding translation, authorship and origin of the prayers, where the liturgy is quoting a biblical text. That will always be on that side. What's in bold, and then the Hebrew that follows it tells you what that comment is commenting on in the liturgy. So that's that side of the page. Also, there are some introductions. You can see right here at the top of the page, introduction to the recitation of the Shema. Major sections have introductions on that right-hand side. The left-hand side, on this side, is more inspirational readings, alternative and creative translations of the liturgy, and poetry. Looking now at the bottom of the page, you'll see here there's a footer. That footer will always orient you as to where you are. In the black letters, it will tell you whether it's Rosh Hashanah and or Yom Kippur, and what service, meaning evening, morning, Musaf, Mincha. In the red in that footer right there at the bottom, it will tell you precisely where in the service you are. So if you're ever unsure and you're lost, just look to the bottom and that will tell you where you are. I'm going to jump down to the next page to show you this. This little banner at the top is that says Shabbat is an indication that this entire page is prayed only on Shabbat. So you have a quick way of looking at it without having to look for the small instruction. You see that banner? If it's not Shabbat, turn the page. Shorter editions for Shabbat, which are in the middle of larger text, are indicated in brackets in red. I'll jump down one more page to show you letters like this. Here's a Beit and Gimel on both sides, Hebrew and English. Those are intended to indicate alternatives. If you see things that are numbered like that, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, those are passages among which you might want to choose one or two. You don't necessarily need to pray them all. Okay, a few specific highlights, things that we created specifically for this book that you might want to look at this year, especially at home. One is the sections on the home blessings. So on page 29 for Rosh Hashanah and 198 for Yom Kippur, there's a section of things specifically for the home. Candle lighting, Kiddush for Rosh Hashanah, but also some beautiful English prayers to welcome the new year. And on Yom Kippur, kavanot for giving tzedakah as part of the process of atoning before Yom Kippur, before the holiday. Prayers for lighting a yahrzeit candle. There is no formal liturgy that's dictated for when you light a yahrzeit candle. So we put in some readings that people might find helpful. And very important, in that section on Yom Kippur, there's a prayer for those who are unable to fast for health reasons. On page 20, there's a rubric that we created for this book called Kiddush Hashanah, which is a section of prayers for the first night of Rosh Hashanah that blesses the new year. Whether you're tuning in to the synagogue service or you're at home, you might want to pray that section just to bless the new year that's coming in. And I also just wanted to point out on page 93, the alternative Avinu Malkeinu, which keeps the basic structure of Avinu Malkeinu, but refers to God with alternate metaphors instead of just Father and King, all kinds of metaphors for God, mostly drawn from the elsewhere in the liturgy. So now just I want 3 suggestions for how to use this book, particularly this year, but really in some ways every year. The first is prepare in advance. Read around in the liturgy, in the commentary. There's so much inspiring material in there to help you prepare your heart and soul and to become more familiar with the liturgy and its structure. Spend some time just looking at the headings and reading the short introductions. It will reveal the structure and help you see it's kind of the frame of the house in which we are dwelling on these days. And the better you understand the frame, the more at home you will feel. That's number 1. Number 2, pay attention to the layout of the liturgical text on both the Hebrew and the English side, things that are laid out in poetry, in columns, or things that are in bold. Because if you do that, you will notice something similar to what in the tech world they call Easter eggs. We don't call them Easter eggs, but similar to that, little bonus insights that are built into the liturgy that are subtle and that we tried to structure the page to reveal. I'm just going to give you one example. I'll share the screen again here. So this is page 234. It's Ki Anu Amecha. And as we know this, right? Ki Anu Amecha ve'ata Eloheinu. So you may probably have noticed, because we sing it aloud, that every line begins Anu ve'ata, we and you, we and you. And that's pretty apparent, I think, in the liturgy. You'll see that we laid it out that way, both Hebrew, English, and transliteration as poetry, so that you can really see that dichotomy. We did that because, not only for what it is, but because of what follows. And what follows is laid out exactly the same way because it's exactly the same structure. Here at the bottom under the Vidui prayers of confession, you can see Anu Ve'ata, Anu Ve'ata, we, you, we, you. 4 lines. Why is that significant? Because Kianu Amecha at the top is about all the things that connect us with God, all the ways in which we are in relationship with God. But in the Vidui at the bottom, it's the opposite. It's about how different we are. The seemingly unbridgeable, irreconcilable gaps. Here it's not we and you, it's we but you. Concluding with the last line, our days are a passing shadow. We are mortal, but you are time without end. You are eternal. And once you see that, because you've noticed the structure on the page, it's actually very meaningful. It's a model not only for how we approach God in asking forgiveness and asking for mercy, but how we might reconcile with other people. We begin by remembering the foundations of our relationship. We matter to each other. We have history with each other. We may owe debts to each other. Then we move on to acknowledge, and yet we're different, and we disappoint and hurt each other, and sometimes there are gaps that are hard to bridge. All of that is revealed just by noticing the structure on the page. The last thing that I want to mention has to do with the readings on the right-hand side of on the left-hand side of the page, especially the poetry. They're placed where they are for very specific reasons. It's not accidental. We didn't just throw, sort of readings and poetry and sprinkle them throughout the book. We tried to place poems and inspirational readings next to liturgy so that they would be in dialogue with each other. Sometimes it amplifies the liturgy or offers an alternative way in. Sometimes the poem or the comment really argues with the liturgy and challenges the liturgy. So a great way to use the Mahzor this year is to spend time focusing on those relationships. Pick some poems that you like, and instead of just reading the poem, read the liturgy and spend time really thinking about, why is this here? What's the connection? And I'll give you just one of my favorites as an example of this. So let me scroll down here so you can see it. This is page 155, and it's the introduction to Mahuyot. Mahuyot is a blessing that is added into the Musaf Amidah on Rosh Hashanah, and it's all about crowning God as sovereign, as king. It's about what we say in the rabbis say is Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim, accepting upon oneself the yoke of the sovereignty of heaven. It's about authority, about God's authority. And the metaphor throughout is God as king. So what you have here on the page is a classical piyut called Melech Elyon, which is about God as king, the sovereign on high, in contrast to, you can see on the bottom here, the impoverished earthly sovereign below, who is chased by exhaustion and enveloped in chaos. The Melech Evyon. That's the classical liturgy. We put next to it this beautiful, beautiful poem right here by Denise Levertov called The Thread. And I'll just leave it to you to read, but I'll just read the last line. Not fear, but a stirring of wonder makes me catch my breath when I feel the tug of it, when I thought it had loosened itself and gone. So what is this doing here? This is a poem also about authority in a certain sense. What claims us? What makes a demand on us? What pulls us? But instead of the metaphor of God as king, it uses the metaphor of a thread. And in doing so, in juxtaposing these two, we hoped really to open up the entire liturgy. What does the metaphor of king offer, and what are its limits? What does the metaphor of a thread offer, and what are the limits of that metaphor? What other metaphors might you offer for yourself for the question of authority? What has a claim on you and why? What pulls me to Judaism? Why am I here in my living room, part of a Rosh Hashanah service on Zoom? What makes me show up in this way? What makes me feel like I have to show up in person when we can do that, right? That's just one example of the way that the poem and the liturgy speak to each other. So I encourage you to do that with all of the poetry and see what it opens for you. How does it help you understand the liturgy? How does it express a problem with the liturgy? What does holding both the poem and the liturgy offer as a way of connecting in prayer on the High Holy Days? So I want to just wish everyone a sweet, transformative, healthy, blessing-filled new year. Shana Tova Umetuka.